Diplomatic breaking point. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood at the viewport of Earth's orbital diplomatic station, her hands clasped behind her back as she gazed at the stars beyond. A massive hegemony vessel had just arrived, its sleek purple-black hull absorbing rather than reflecting the light of Sol. Even after 3 years of interaction with the galactic hegemony, the sight of their ships still filled her with a mixture of awe and unease. "They're early," said Colonel Weijong, coming to stand beside her. "That's never a good sign." "No, it isn't," Elena agreed, studying the vessel. The immutable decree was a diplomatic ship, but like all hegemony vessels, it bristled with weapons. The hegemony didn't believe in separating diplomacy from military might. Why would they? They'd ruled the known galaxy for 10,000 years. "Ambassador Threx Calden has requested immediate audience," reported Lieutenant Dias from her communication station. "He says it's a matter of utmost urgency." Elena and Wei exchanged glances. "Have representatives from the United Earth government been notified?" "Yes, Admiral. Secretary General Okafor and the Security Council are already in the conference chamber." "Then let's not keep our guests waiting." The hegemony delegation swept into the conference chamber with their typical grandeur, led by Ambassador Threx Calden. The Vexari ambassador stood nearly 3 meters tall, his 4 arms draped in shimmering ceremonial robes embroidered with the complex mathematical patterns that represented his rank and lineage. His elongated head housed 6 dark eyes that seemed to take in everything at once, and the silver implants at his temples pulsed with a subtle light. "Secretary General Okafor," Threx Calden said, inclining his head slightly. The translation device at his throat converted his natural clicking speech into smooth, accentless English. "The Grand Council sends its regards." Okafor, a tall Nigerian woman whose diplomatic skills had helped guide humanity through its first tentative steps into the galactic community, smiled politely. "Ambassador Threx Calden, this is an unexpected pleasure. We weren't scheduled to discuss the technology exchange program until next month." "This is not about the technology exchange," Threx Calden said, his voice suddenly cold. "The Grand Council has convened an emergency session regarding Earth." The temperature in the room seemed to drop by several degrees. "I wasn't aware Earth was on the Council's agenda," Okafor said, her smile never faltering. "It became so when your military vessels were detected in the Proxima Centauri system, conducting weapons tests in violation of your membership agreement." Okafor's smile remained, but her eyes hardened. "Those weren't weapons tests, Ambassador. They were defensive shield calibrations, which are explicitly permitted under Section 7 of our agreement. The Council disagrees with your interpretation." Threx Calden gestured, and one of his aides stepped forward with a holographic projector. With a wave of his hand, the aide activated it, displaying a complex document written in both standard Galactic and English. "The Grand Council has issued a formal censure against Earth, effective immediately." Elena felt her jaw tighten. A formal censure was the first step toward sanctions. "This is absurd," Wei said, stepping forward. "We've adhered to every letter of the agreement. These shield calibrations were reported to your military liaison before they began." "Colonel Zhang," Okafor said quietly, "please allow the ambassador to finish." Threx Calden's upper eyes narrowed slightly in what Elena had learned was a Vexari expression of disdain. "The Council has determined that Earth has been systematically circumventing the technological development restrictions placed upon it. Your shield calibrations were merely the most recent example." "Ambassador," Okafor said, her voice now carrying an edge, "humanity agreed to certain limitations on military technology development as a condition of joining the galactic community. We have not violated those terms. The terms also included restrictions on the rate of your colonial expansion," Threx Calden countered. "Yet in 3 years, you have established 7 colonies beyond your solar system, all within the permitted range and reported to the Council," Okafor responded. "Perhaps, but the speed of development suggests clandestine technological advancement." The ambassador's voice grew colder. The Council cannot allow a species with your historical tendencies toward violence to advance too quickly. Alina felt her blood boil at the condescension in his tone. Humanity had fought 3 world wars before finally uniting under the UEG banner, but they had maintained peace for over a century. Yes, their history was violent. But what species wasn't? What exactly is the Council proposing, Ambassador? Okafor asked, maintaining her composure. Effective immediately, a Level 3 sanction regime will be implemented against Earth and all its colonies. Frex Kalden's announcement sent shockwaves through the human delegation. All technological exchange programs will be suspended. Earth vessels will be restricted to your home system. A hegemony blockade will ensure compliance. This is outrageous. Wei exploded. A blockade is an act of war. It is an act of peacekeeping, Frex Kalden corrected. The sanctions will remain in place until Earth submits to a full inspection regime of all military and research facilities. Alina watched as Okafor's expression transformed from diplomatic politeness to cold fury. Ambassador, please return to your vessel while we consider this proposal. This is not a proposal, Secretary General. It is a directive from the Grand Council itself. Frex Kalden gestured, and a holographic document expanded to show the seals of all 12 members of the Grand Council. The blockade ships will arrive within 3 of your Earth days. I suggest you use that time to prepare your people for the new reality. With that, the ambassador and his entourage swept from the room, leaving a stunned silence in their wake. They can't do this, Wei said after a moment. We're a sovereign species. They can, and they have, Alina replied grimly. The question is, what do we do about it? Okafor's eyes met Alina's. Implement contingency Prometheus. Alina felt her heart rate increase. Madam Secretary, are you certain? Once initiated. I'm certain, Admiral, Okafor said, her voice steady. The Security Council authorized it last month after the hegemony's inspection of the Mars research facilities. They're not interested in partnership. They never were. They want to keep us contained, controlled. The hegemony has dominated the galaxy for 10 millennia, Wei pointed out. They have technologies we can barely comprehend. Yes, Okafor agreed, but they've also grown complacent. And they've never faced humans before. 3 days later, as promised, the hegemony blockade arrived. 7 massive warships took up positions at the edge of the solar system, their presence a not-so-subtle reminder of the hegemony's power. On Earth, in the underground command center beneath the UEG headquarters in Nairobi, Alina watched the deployment with grim satisfaction. All ships in position, exactly as we predicted, she reported to the assembled Security Council. They've stationed vessels at each of the primary jump points. And our response? Asked Councillor Nakamura. Alina nodded to Colonel Zhang, who activated the main display. Operation Thunderstrike is ready to commence. All colonial defense forces are on standby. The stealth fleet has been deployed to the designated coordinates. The hegemony believes they're dealing with a compliant, technologically inferior species, Okafor said, addressing the Council. They have no idea what we've been developing since we first encountered their scout ships 7 years ago. Alina took a deep breath. There's still time to attempt diplomatic resolution. We tried diplomacy, Okafor replied. They responded with threats and sanctions. Humanity will not be subjugated again. Not by our own kind, and certainly not by aliens who see us as primitive barbarians to be controlled. She looked around the table, meeting each council member's eyes. The vote. One by one, the 12 members of the Earth Security Council voted. The result was unanimous. Send the message, Okafor ordered. Alina nodded to the communications officer, who transmitted a simple text-only message to the hegemony flagship. Sanctions rejected. Remove your vessels immediately or face the consequences. The response came almost instantly. Comply or be destroyed. Okafor's expression was iron. Commence Operation Thunderstrike. Across the solar system, humanity's response began. from hidden bases on asteroids and moons, from the supposedly civilian space stations, from Earth itself. The carefully concealed weapons of humanity revealed themselves. The hegemony had made a critical error in their assessment of Earth. They had assumed that humanity's relatively recent entry into space meant technological inferiority. They had failed to consider what a species forged in millennia of warfare might accomplish when faced with existential threat. They were about to learn. Operation Thunderstrike. Fleet Commander Self-Nar of the Hegemony Blockade Force stared at the message from Earth with something approaching amusement. In his 8 centuries of service to the hegemony, he had overseen dozens of sanction operations against upstart species. None had ever lasted more than a few local months before the targeted species surrendered, usually without a single shot fired. "These humans are more spirited than our intelligence suggested," he remarked to his second, Sub-Commander Vrex. "Perhaps their brief history gives them insufficient perspective on the futility of resistance. Should we respond with a demonstration, Commander?" Vrex asked eagerly. The young officer had never seen actual combat. Few in the hegemony forces had in the last 1,000 years. Zelfnar considered this a measured response. Target one of their outer system monitoring stations. Minimal casualties, but sufficient to demonstrate our resolve. "At once, Commander." The order was transmitted to the Unyielding Justice, positioned near Neptune. The warship powered its main weapon systems, targeting a small Earth observation post on Triton. That's when everything changed. "Commander." Vrex's voice was suddenly high with alarm. Energy spikes detected throughout the system. Thousands of them. "Source." Zelfnar demanded, all amusement vanishing. "Everywhere. Asteroids, moons, even what we classified as debris fields." Before Zelfnar could process this, the first reports of attacks flooded in. The Unyielding Justice was reporting multiple impacts, not from conventional weapons, but from swarms of what appeared to be miniaturized attack drones. Simultaneously, the Eternal Vigilance near Jupiter was under assault from energy weapons mounted on what had been classified as civilian mining platforms. "Impossible," Zelfnar breathed. The humans had concealed military assets throughout their entire system, disguising them as civilian infrastructure or natural formations. Such deception was unprecedented. The Unyielding Justice reports shield failures on multiple sectors. Vrex reported, his voice cracking. "The drones they're boring through the hull." Zelfnar stared at the tactical display in disbelief as red indicators multiplied across his fleet. "Deploy countermeasures. All ships, battle formation Delta." But the hegemony fleet had been positioned to blockade, not to defend against attack from within the system itself. As they attempted to regroup, a new threat appeared. "Slip space ruptures detected," the sensor officer shouted. "Multiple vessels emerging, configuration unknown." From the darkness between worlds, humanity's true fleet arrived. Sleek, predatory vessels, nothing like the bulky transport and exploration ships the hegemony had observed, emerged from what should have been impossible FTL jumps within a solar system. "How?" Zelfnar demanded. "The energy requirements for in-system jumps. They're targeting our command and control systems," Vrex interrupted. "Communications with the Eternal Vigilance and Unyielding Justice lost." On Earth, Admiral Vasquez watched the battle unfold with intense focus. "The Argentum drive performed exactly as expected," she reported. "All stealth fleet vessels have successfully completed in-system jumps." Secretary General Okafor nodded. "And the hegemony response?" "Confusion. Primarily," Colonel Zhang replied with grim satisfaction. "They're attempting to regroup, but our swarm attacks are preventing effective coordination. 3 of their vessels have already been neutralized. And civilian casualties?" "None, Madam Secretary. As directed, we targeted only military systems. Their life support and evacuation protocols remain functional." "Good. We're not barbarians, despite what they think of us." Okafor studied the tactical display. Their flagship is still operational. Yes, Fleet Commander Xelthnar is attempting to rally his remaining vessels. Open a channel. On the Hegemony flagship, Xelthnar was fighting to maintain control of both his vessel and his composure when the communication request came through. Human transmission, priority channel, reported his communications officer. Accept, Xelthnar ordered, straightening his posture despite the chaos around him. The image of Secretary General Okafor appeared, her expression calm but resolute. Fleet Commander Xelthnar, I trust we now have your full attention. Xelthnar fought to keep his voice steady. This unprovoked attack on hegemony forces will result in the full might of our empire being brought against your world. Surrender now, and perhaps some portion of your species will be permitted to survive. Okafor's expression didn't change. Commander, let me be clear. What you're witnessing is approximately 8% of our military capability. We have similar defenses at each of our colonial worlds, and our main battle fleet remains in reserve. She paused, letting that sink in. Furthermore, we have transmitted complete schematics of our Argentum drive and autonomous swarm technology to every species currently under hegemony sanctions. I imagine your council will soon be facing rebellions across multiple sectors. Xelthnar felt cold dread spreading through him. You cannot hope to challenge 10,000 years of hegemony rule. We don't need to challenge all 10,000 years today, Commander. Just you, here now. Okafor's voice hardened. You have 1 hour to withdraw all forces from our system and transmit the revocation of sanctions to the Grand Council. After that, we will disable your remaining vessels and add them to our growing collection of hegemony technology to reverse engineer. The communication ended, leaving Xelthnar staring at empty space. Commander, Vrex prompted after a moment of silence. Your orders? Xelthnar looked at his tactical display. 3 ships lost, 2 more reporting critical damage, and the humans claimed this was only a fraction of their capability. Whether that was true or not, he could not win this battle. Not today. Signal all vessels, he said finally. Withdraw to emergency coordinates, and prepare a full report to the Grand Council. As the remains of the hegemony fleet limped away from Sol, Admiral Vasquez allowed herself a small smile. They're retreating, she confirmed. All hegemony vessels are breaking orbit and moving toward the system edge. Cheers erupted across the command center, but Secretary General Okafor raised a hand for silence. This is only the beginning, she cautioned. The hegemony won't take this humiliation lightly. They'll return with a larger force once they've analyzed our capabilities, by which time we'll have distributed the Argentum drive specifications to half the galaxy, Colonel Zhang pointed out. The hegemony's days of unchallenged rule are over. Perhaps, Okafor agreed. But our goal was never to replace one empire with another. Humanity has seen enough of empires. She turned to Admiral Vasquez. Activate Phase 2. Contact the representatives of the Fellery Alliance, the Nixian Collective, and the other independent systems. It's time to discuss an alternative to the hegemony. In the dark between stars, humanity's message spread. Not one of conquest or dominance, but of partnership and mutual defense. Species that had chafed under hegemony rule for centuries found in humanity something they had long forgotten: hope. 6 months later, representatives from 27 species gathered on Earth to sign the Terran Accords, a new compact of free worlds pledged to mutual defense and technological exchange. The hegemony, suddenly facing resistance across multiple sectors and the rapid proliferation of technologies they had suppressed for millennia, found their empire crumbling not through direct confrontation, but through the quiet withdrawal of world after world. In the Great Hall of the United Earth Government in Nairobi, Secretary General Okafor addressed the assembled delegates. The galaxy stands at a crossroads, she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. For too long, progress has been stifled, potential squandered, all in service to stability and control. Today, we choose a different path, not the domination of one species over others, but genuine partnership. She looked around at the diverse gathering. Beings of all shapes, sizes, and evolutionary backgrounds, united not by force but by choice. The stars belong to all of us, she concluded, and together we will reach them. As the applause echoed through the hall, Admiral Vasquez stood at attention, reflecting on the long journey that had brought humanity to this moment. They had entered the galactic stage as newcomers, been dismissed as primitives, and threatened with subjugation. Instead, they had become catalysts for change on a scale unseen for millennia. The hegemony had made a fundamental mistake. They had looked at humanity's brief history of spaceflight and seen weakness. They should have looked at humanity's long history of overcoming impossible odds and seen what they truly were: survivors, innovators, and above all, indomitable. And now, the galaxy would never be the same again.